Hey guys, this is Solution PODFIC, and today we're going to be reading Green Thorn Through by another fucking Robin. This is Chapter 9. Peter jerks awake, and for a few moments he doesn't know where he is. Green, red, and gold flutter in and out of his vision, half-fledged conversations bob around in his mind, arguments with the voices that he can't recall. It floods him with sadness and anger and deep, gut-wrenching homesickness. He can't survive like this, all alone and constantly on the verge of a breakdown. He'll just spiral and spiral until he explodes. So he squashes those feelings deep inside, locks them up tight, where they'll never see the light of day. He waits for the confusion and haziness that always comes with passing out to fade, and once they retreat to the point that he can conjure up words and thoughts, he makes it a point to take stock of himself. His clothes are heavy with rainwater stuck to his skin, his teeth are chattering, and he's mildly panicked to find that he can't feel his hands or feet. When he holds his shaking fingers up to his face, he can see that the skin has an unnatural grayish tinge, looking almost waxy. Frostbite. He tries to remember what to do for frostbite. He's gotten it enough to know what to do, but his mind keeps tripping and stumbling over his thoughts. After a moment of staring at his frozen fingers, it strikes him. Warmth. He needs warmth. Yeah, no shit. He walks mindlessly through the Gotham streets, bathed in fresh morning light. His only coherent thought, warm. He needs to be warm. He intertwines his fingers, keeping his hands close to his core and periodically blowing hot breath into them. He rubs his knuckles with his thumbs. It's painful, torsion on his fingers, but at least he can feel something. That has to be a good sign, right? Exasperated disagreements bubble in his ears, but he doesn't see them offering any suggestions, so he'd like them to shut it. Thanks. At some point he realizes where he's walking, picks up the pace. Martha's house. Last time he was there it was warm, and it had food, which just sounds so good right now. He also associates that place with a vaguely familiar blue and purple smile. It makes him want to smile too, so it makes sense that his body's subconsciously making its way there. Heated air steams out of the open door, hitting his face and torso. It makes him want to cry. The way the heat pricks at his eyes and encourages the tinkling of his healing factor. Smothering, but like a blanket or a hug. The weight of icy guilt is lifted momentarily off of him, only to be replaced with exhaustion. His movements grow sluggish and imprecise, warmth coaxing his eyelids shut as he stumbles through the entryway. His eyes scan the room, looking for somewhere to sit or even lean, but his teeth are chattering so much that he can't see through the motion blur. He only registers a flurry of blue and purple moving towards him as a hand settles on his shoulder, propping him up. Whoa, steady. The words take a minute to register in his brain, like video game lag. Sorry, he eventually slurs, tongue leaden in his mouth. The volunteer appears slightly shocked, hand tensing against his shoulder. She recovers quickly though, face hardening in concern. Let's get you warmed up, yeah? You're practically blue. She steers him to an unoccupied bench and sits him down on the edge. She talks to him the whole time, her voice vaguely familiar but impossible to place. She tells him about her day, her job, and rants to him about an engineering problem she's struggling with. Keeping Peter awake, he realizes, a gesture that Peter himself does not appreciate, but the gold at the edge of his vision does. She does, however, manage to win him over when she pushes a warm mug into his numb hands. The hot water will come on once it hits 7 and stay on till 8. Once it's done, you should get in there, warm up a little, you look hypothermic. She pauses to look him over. Honestly, you should probably see a doctor, but I understand that's probably not an option for you. The doors close at 9. If you're inside when they close, you're stuck here until morning. You got that? Name. She's asking his name. But Peter. She smiles. Okay then, Peter. My name's Harper. He nods, not trusting himself to respond with coherent words. He feels much better after a warm shower, after feeling the tension thaw and melt away down the drain. Now the unbearable cold that had managed to permeate his core has subsided to a slight chill that crawls under his skin. He blasts his drenched clothes and soggy dollar bills a few times with the hairdryer that's bolted into the wall. It's hard to maneuver. All his other clothes are in the drawstring bag in the bookstore, and he refuses to go back into the freezing clothes after his shower. And if his money rips, it'll be completely useless. In the end, he manages to salvage 13 of his 15 bills, and transform his clothes from drenched and freezing to damp and slightly less freezing. Not great, but better than nothing. Harper runs up to him when he gets into the common area. She has 2 plates of food in her hands. That confuses him. The room is filled with half-dismantled tables and is clearly in the process of being transformed out of a canteen after dinner. There shouldn't be any food left. Regardless, she pushes a plate of macaroni into his hands and shepherds him over to his seating area. They eat in pleasant silence, which is good. Peter is much too absorbed in eating to listen. The food is hot, cheese still bubbling, tiny flakes of ham mixed into the pasta. It's heavenly. By the time both their plates are clear, it's dark outside. The sun has set hours ago, but it had only just become truly dark. Like, barely being able to see the ground dark. Gotham really is a different breed. He psychs himself up to leave and head back to the bookstore, mentally preparing for muggers, gang members, and genuinely not very nice people patrolling in the dark. He can't stay, can't take up a bed, can't trust himself to be around as many people when Emerald Fury burns in his gut. Plus, he feels a lot better now than when he entered. His stomach is full, or as full as it can be. His frostbitten fingers and toes are back to normal, and he feels slightly less alone. He wants to go back to the bookstore. He does. Oh my god, the kid is almost as stubborn as Steve. You have somewhere to stay, right, Peter? Because the whole purpose of this place is to give people in the streets somewhere safe to sleep. Yeah, I've got a safe place. Promise. Unfucking believable. Okay, she says, looking and sounding thoroughly unconvinced. The library is open super late if you want somewhere with heating to stay before you head back to your place. But I have a friend at She says more, but Peter checks out after the mention of the library. Too caught off guard by two facts that just hit him like a freight train. Number one, he's already been to Gotham's library, and he totally freaked out at a random librarian, who he really has to apologize to. And number two, the reason Harper seemed so familiar was because he'd met her already. She was the blue-haired girl that had given him clothes and food and had pointed him in the direction of the library before. He hadn't recognized her. You're a master at repression, kid. Oh my god, this is so embarrassing. He's broken out of his mortification by Harper's taps on his empty plate. You didn't hear any of that, did you? It's more of a statement than a question. He smiles sheepishly and nods, eyes fixed firmly on his shoes. She sighs, but with an undercurrent of amusement. I was just saying how a librarian called Barbara in particular are really good at not noticing if you happen to accidentally fall asleep in the non-fiction section, she says with an obvious wink. And how if you ever come to be on the verge of popsicle like you were before, you should go to Doc Tompkins' shelter. It's just a couple streets over and completely free. You can't miss it. Thank you, he says, voice small, too small for how big his gratitude is, but he can't force it louder. Anytime, she smiles, before becoming distracted by her buzzing pocket. She pulls out her phone and checks the screen briefly before adding, "You should be heading out if you don't want to stay, though. Doors close in 10 minutes. A quick glance over at the clock on the wall tells him that she is right. He goes to grab his backpack before realizing that he doesn't own anything here and aborted the motion halfway through. He thanks Harper profusely and is out into the night, mission clear in his mind. He will go back to the bookstore, rest, and go to the library in the morning to gather information about the universe he now finds himself in, but mostly to apologize to Barbara. And Peter does just that. Well, minus the resting bit. He did go back to the bookshop, and he did manage to fall asleep, but his dreams are filled with orange sand and strange stars. Objectively inane things, but the sight of them made Peter wake up screaming, sweating and nauseous with dread. So he was up early. Too early to walk to the library without looking like a creep. He paced around the bookshop, straightened the bars over a window, and reorganized some of the books until he guessed the time was a reasonable hour. The hours spent awake and the restless nights of the kind of sleep have carved exhaustion into his soul, but he is too determined to apologize to the ginger lady and his slanted members to stop walking. The walk is both shorter and longer than he remembers. Shorter because he is much more aware of his changing surroundings, and as a result, more in control of the direction he's going. Longer because with the clarity comes curiosity, and the city is so beautiful. Sure, it's caked in layers of filth and soaked in various body fluids, but under all the grime is a city made of spires and gargoyles and stone, and it all adds to the gothic aesthetic in a way that screams Pinterest, if Pinterest was full of drug houses and brothels. Okay, so maybe it also felt longer because he could hear every crime happening around the city, smell the fear, and taste every drop of blood. And it killed him inside to walk away. Ever since waking up in the green, his senses have been keener. Not like after the bite. That was like his senses got bigger and deeper. The extra depth meant that he could suddenly see, hear, smell, taste, and touch more. See more colors, hear higher and lower pitched sounds, feel shifts in the air and heat. The added size increased his range, expanding his awareness from everything in the same room as him to everything in a block radius. This wasn't quite like that. This is more like his senses got sharper. He was now able to smell just how much of the city smell, trademark, was blood or vomit or urine. He could feel the difference from voices to footfall to heartbeats of pedestrians roaming through the sidewalk. He has always struggled to focus with the constant sensory input, and that was when it was all blurry. Now he could hear and smell and see each sound, scent, and sight in acute, vicious detail. And it hurt. It hurt his head to try and sift through all the information, and it hurt his heart to know exactly what is happening throughout the city. And where. It makes walking so hard, when he knows he can be helping, doing something. But Peter hasn't forgotten about the other difference since the green. The anger, the fog that overcomes him, pushing him out of his body and muffling the world until it's nothing but green, green, green. Each time he's been overwhelmed with it, there's a voice inside, one that he's not completely sure belongs to him, and it calls for brutality, for pain and suffering, and it scares him. To imagine how much damage he would do if he listened. So, for now, he has to walk away. Walk away from the blood-lined streets that satiate that part of his soul that terrifies him. He stands outside the tall building for a while, trying to work up the nerve to enter. He doesn't remember so much about his last trip here, and bottomless satisfaction, fear, fills him at the thought that he might have hurt someone. One thing he definitely remembers is lashing out at a ginger woman, who he now knows through his conversation with Harper to be Barbara. But other than that, he is completely in the dark. He could have done anything, from telling her she looked gross to dismemberment. The uncertainty makes him sick to his stomach. He tugs at the string of his hoodie. What if he scared her? What if she doesn't want to see him? He would leave a note, except he doesn't own a pen or paper. And she probably doesn't know his name. Oh, and when it looks super creepy, what would he even say? Hi Barbara, it's me Peter. I'm that complete lunatic that may or may not have grievously injured you recently. I'm too much of a coward to say sorry in person, so I wrote you a cute little stalker note. Lots of love. Your maybe Mamer. Definitely don't do that. Barbara had told that the boy, Peter, she now knew, was probably going to show up at the library by Harper. Last night there was multiple very long back-and-forth conversations over text trying to determine his potential threat level. Harper was adamant that he posed no threat at all, that he was just confused and scared and in need of help. When she asked Dick for his opinion, he had insisted, even though he has the means to become a problem, he won't. When Barbara expressed her skepticism, he told her that he'd found him on top of a building 2 nights ago ready to jump and worryingly unresponsive. He said they had stood hugging, maybe a little too tightly on the boy's part, until long after the sun went down. He had even gotten Steph and Cass to cover his usual patrol route so that he could stay with the kid, though he hadn't told them why at the time. Dick says that he is more of a risk to himself than anyone else, that he has somehow managed to retain his morals and he really needed that hug. Though even Dick couldn't explain how the kid had managed to ditch the tracker that was placed on him. Tim, who had been watching through the library's cameras, had been thoroughly confused by the boy's display of self-control and had reserved the right to pass judgment. Jason had seen her messages but hadn't responded, which was its own can of worms that she'll think about later. Barbara was more unsure. She had just seen how glazed his eyes were, how confusion swam around him, how despite that he had held the door open for her and stared in wonder at the library. However, she was also intimately aware how quickly that could change. She had seen herself how suddenly his joy at the library had flipped to distress and anger over an innocent question, and how he had immediately diffused the situation by walking away, how he'd run out of the library crying. Everything he did contradicted what she'd expected. It was exhausting. Harper had mentioned that he hadn't seemed to recognize her at first, which hints at the possible memory loss stemming from the Lazarus pit, or maybe PTSD from however he ended up in the pit at the first place. She had also said that he was talking full sentences, which is nothing short of a miracle. Jason was supposedly mindless for a year after his dip in the waters, indiscriminately destroying anything in the vicinity. Sure, he'd been able to get a grip on his anger eventually, but that was after years of intense training by Talia al Ghul herself. And this kid, whoever he is, doesn't have ties in the leagues of assassins, if Talia and their other informants are to be believed. Which also begs the question of how and why he was resurrected. But like Jason's lack of response, that was a future Barbara problem. Present Barbara was trying to maintain the illusion of ignorance while she photocopies the "Welcome to Gotham" pamphlets, acutely aware of the same boy fidgeting with his hoodie behind her. After a while, she physically couldn't photocopy any slower without drawing suspicion, so she turns around and attempts to force the conversation into starting. He's practically buzzing with nervousness, eyes darting around the room, unable to rest on a single detail. His pupils are also tiny, like he's standing on the surface of the sun, instead of in a moderately lit library. She mentally updates the list of possible meta abilities to include super senses. "Hi, can I help you with something?" she asks, slipping into her customer service voice. Something tells her that he'll be less nervous if she feigns ignorance. His face shifts from restless anxiety to exaggerated confusion. He even tilts his head to one side, looking comically similar to a cartoon puppy. He starts, hilariously lost. I came here a couple days ago, and I think I shouted at you. I'm really sorry if I scared you. I didn't mean to." He looks down at his shoes, hands that are completely covered by his sleeves swing anxiously at his sides, and damn, if that kid isn't adorable. He really needs to work on hiding his emotions, but it's kind of endearing, the way she can hear the honesty and remorse in his tone, clear as glass. It's refreshing after spending so long around the bats, who always have at least one secret up their sleeve. Wait, no. She's supposed to be the voice of reason. She's supposed to be playing devil's or zombies advocate in this argument. But he's just so small. Practically swallowed by a Batman hoodie and Wonder Woman sweatpants, radiating the nervousness freely, not even trying to rein in his anxious mannerisms. She is suddenly assaulted with flashbacks of Jason back when he was Robin, bouncy and bright and so honest. That's what Peter reminds her of, but more brittle, hanging on by a thread. She now sees why Dick defended him so adamantly. Oh, that was you? It's completely fine. You were hardly the most annoying person in the library that day. Besides, I was asking a lot of questions. I'm sorry that I pushed you so much. No, you didn't push. I had no reason to get so angry. It was all my fault. So he's aware of the anger, and he doesn't seem to know where it's coming from, which is interesting. He also clearly has a guilt complex, which is sad. He's so young. Too young to have been killed, too young to be worrying about murderous rage. I could respond, but I have a feeling that if I did, we'd be stuck in an endless apology loop. So let's start over. She holds out her hand. My name is Barbara. After a moment of staring in shock, he takes her hand, grip loose. My name's Peter. Well, it's nice to meet you, Peter. She smiles. Is there anything I can help you with today? His brows furrow and he bites his bottom lip, like he didn't think this conversation would get this far at all. Oh, I kinda just came here to apologize. But if you have computers here, that would be helpful. His memory must be worse than she thought. He used the computers last time he was here. Yep, just over there. She points to the far side of the room. If you don't have a library card, you can log in as a guest. But you can't print anything or borrow any books. Peter bites his bottom lip like he's trying to contain his smile. Thank you so much, Miss Barbara, he says before waving her goodbye and disappearing deeper into the library. Alright guys, and that is the end of chapter 9 of Green Through and Through by another fucking Robin. I hope you guys like this chapter and I'll see you next one.